So let's get to our next speaker. I want to introduce you Eric Lau. He works at Brain Butter Solutions. So,
Hi.
how are you?
Just give me 1 second. I am good. I'm very good. It's a bit late here where I am. It's like 1 a.m., but I'm ready to go.
So we started with speakers who are speaking at night today.
Yep.
So, is this your first online conference?
No, I mean, for this one, it's my first time presenting at this conference, but I have done a few other ones in the past.
Oh. How is the impression like before, the feeling before the speech?
You always get butterflies in your stomach. I mean, it's virtual is a little different. I mean, when you're presenting, to a real audience, there's definitely more of it. But it's always there. It's good. It's a good thing. You want your butterflies in your stomach because otherwise, you're not really excited about the topic, right? You feed off that energy.
So I wish you luck. So I will be here in backstage. In anytime you can ask any question if there were any difficulties. So
yeah.
The stage is yours.
All right, thank you. All right, so the topic today is give me a second. Let me switch this. There you go. Applying event sourcing to enterprise front-end applications. So I have my own business. I'm a consultant at Brain Butter Solutions. So a lot of times, what I wind up doing is helping a fair amount of people deal with the front end applications. And when I say front end, I mean I never get questions about CSS. It's not CSS, not layouts, not styling that people struggle with at an enterprise level. It's almost always data management and managing state. So that's where this topic comes in. So I think that a previous presenter in a couple of hours ago talked about event driven, and really event sourcing is just a way of saying that the data should be driven by, or the source of truth is our events. So in this presentation, I assume we know that a little bit of that. I've seen a little bit of basic not what Redux is because and event sourcing, because that's if I have to explain the begin or the basics of it, then we won't have time. I want to get maximum use on a senior track for you guys, all you out there at this hour. So who am I? You can look up me up. I started as a back end and then got pulled out to the front end while working on auction site in 2014. So my reaction. God, no, I used to hate it. I used to hate working on front end until I discovered React and Redux. And you know what? Now it's all good. It's Redux. I for me, it clicked because I understood event sourcing. I knew about it even before it became a big paradigm. Like right now, like event sourcing is a certified like pattern that you see in cloud computing. But even before that, I kind of get what it is. So so that's where it comes in. And I found that this Redux been around for at least a number like 3 or 4 years at least that. But what I found is that in all my years I've started using it, I've never seen code from real production projects that adhere to all the essential Redux best practices. So I think a lot of time that misunderstanding or not using it properly is not necessarily understanding event sourcing and using the event sourcing best practices. So that's where this speak talked about, right? Why aren't best practices followed? I just found that a lot of times they're not familiar with event sourcing. They don't, I think with front end coders, especially, you think about the days of jQuery and whatnot, very, it's just getting the data in, right? You're just getting data in as quickly as possible and just use it. And you don't necessarily think about how it's going to be used by multiple components and whatnot. So this initial bit to just put the data in, it becomes a critical mistake that makes it really hard to fix later on. I found that like if you, example, you did suboptimal in JSS, or sorry CSS, or you did suboptimal in styling, or you didn't like do layouts of fixing those are not generally that difficult because they are relatively isolated. Redux problems are much harder because they affect every aspect of the application. Um, in fact, I've numerous times I've been brought in for projects where essentially all I did for the client, but it was no small feat, was just revamp the entire Redux because it was got to a point where it was so bad that I had to basically build whole Redux. And once the Redux is built, then everything just kind of falls into place. So let's I mean I'll get right into the sort of what Redux is and how to use it, right? So Redux is a single state storage, right? So you have one single JSON object that represents the entire state of the application. So you have reducers essentially that takes in actions, determines what state changes need to occur, and make it so, right? As I already mentioned before, bad state management is the number one cause of React project failures. I literally can look at the Redux, how it's set up, and the reducers, and I can pretty much have a pretty good idea what's the state of play for that front end project. So what I get, put nuggets for you says these are sort of things that you shall do. And some things are just, from my experience, it's just one of those like 10 commandments type thing where you just do. So the first one, and I keep this in caps for reasons, that you need to store a single source of truth. And I've seen this not follow even in very top company like the websites, because in it used to be that you can rely on customer or early adopters you realize, oh, the data isn't correct, right? You just click refresh or refresh the page and it does, and that's not going to cut it. It's I work from a fair bit of e-commerce or with a point of sales, and when it comes to reports in terms of dollars and amounts, it's very important that all your aspects of applications show the consistent set of data. So that's why the storing the single source of truth is very, very important. So for example, if you have a list of contacts and names, you need to store that so that there's only one instance of this contact. So you don't, for example, store like contact A in section A and B and C of your Redux store. So that's the thing that's really, really important. In fact, it helps to plan out a little bit about where your state is and where your critical piece of information is stored, particularly ones that have to do with the data entities. So second thing I found that was really important to keep state immutable. Redux demands that. And I've had scenarios where I accidentally mutated state in a reducer, and it was incredibly difficult to debug because you never get an error. You just get really weird data, and you don't even know when it happens. It's very, very painful. So it's much easier now with the Redux toolkit. So if there's a link right there. You can definitely take a look at that. One particular tool I would mention specifically, because immutability is such a critical thing, and it used to be a pain. So now the thing that really works well is Immer. And I'm sure a lot of you heard of it. If you haven't, definitely check it out, because Immer, it's I mean, I wish I immersed when I first started. Let's put it that way. I mean, it basically allows you to create immutable objects while essentially letting you pretend that they're mutable and just do what you normally would do, which is amazing. Because before, we were, the tools I had to use that will have you have to learn a whole new syntax, and it got to be a pain. Um, So that one's an important one. And then a third one here is reducer, sorry, must be pure. And what I mean by pure is pure functions, meaning that if you're given X and Y as input, you always get Z. You always get Z at all times. So something that isn't pure would be something that, for example, that gives you the current time, right? If you just go, give me a current time, well, you can't put that. You can't go get the current time in a reducer, because you can't run the same code with the same input and get a different output. That will give you a lot. You get into trouble with that. You get some weird behavior. So the question is, how do you do something like that? Well, you do something like that by, for example, creating an action that has the current time, and then you feed that payload into the reducer. So that's really what that is. So the other one is put serializable values in state action. Like, for example, you don't want to put something that you couldn't put into a plain JSON. Like, you don't really want to use things like that. You are aiming that the values are in states of action needs to be able to serialize to plain JSON. Treat reducers as state machines. What I mean by that is that reducers should really just manage the state and the transitional state. You don't want business logic in there. You don't want it to be very heavy. You really want it to be act like a data access. You just changing a number or you're adding it to an array, for example. You don't want to be figure out like that doing things like to add if all of conditionals is what I'm just saying. You want to minimize that. The other one is model actions as events. So that's actually an interesting one, because I've seen a lot of times, for example, let's say you're making changes to a hotel reservation or something like that, right? I've seen like a lot of times like they would try to reuse actions like edit reservation or some update reservations like that, but you don't know how it happened. For example, someone will use that for actually editing like specific fields, or they want to book it, or they want to do some sort of state transitions. And generally what you want is that you want your actions to be very specific, like to the UI. Like, for example, if there's a button that says book a hotel, for example, you want an action that says book hotel. You may even want a number of different actions that may do very similar thing, or not the same thing, but you may want to have a different action so it's easier to tell where the button is from, like where the UI flow that got to that point. I mean, action types are cheap. They're just a string. You can name it whatever you want. And oftentimes, I think the more you're specific with the action, the easier it is for you to pinpoint what exactly the debugging or troubleshooting to know what things happened, right? How that action got triggered in the first place. And then the next point is very similar to that. So you want one or two actions to trigger all the necessary state changes. So what you don't want is a scenario where you fire something and it causes 5 or 6 actions to fire. Then it becomes very difficult to figure, well, what was the thing to go start up in the first place. Now, sometimes you try to do one, but it's not always possible. For example, the basic async, right? Going to the API for data, you're going to get two actions when you click or a user clicks a button. One for the actual trigger, and one for the showing the success or whatever when the data comes back. At least, right? So those things you can avoid, right? But you don't want to reuse action events. You want to when you see the action that comes up in the Redux dev tools, you want to know that should be description of an action type name alone. Oh, where the user was, what that user was trying to do, right? And a lot of times it's okay to have a lot of different actions because many reducers can respond to the same action, and it's perfectly okay for multiple actions to be responded in the same way by a single reducer. That's perfectly fine too. So these are highly recommended ones. Okay, so here, one second here. The highly recommended ones are number one. I think I alluded to this already. Plan ahead. If you know that you got like these data entities and you got you sort of figure out what your data your data should look like. And one thing I would say is that you don't want to say you want to design the data of your Redux data application to be the way that you will present the data. A good example is of dates, right? Like you don't necessarily want to store exactly how your one of your UI will show the date, right? For date, for example, I one of my favorite ways to store date is just use a number to store number of milliseconds past Unix epoch. And the reason for that is that is very, very obvious that you not obvious, sorry, you can convert that to anything else. You're not losing any information. So one thing I found that a mistake that sometimes got made is that they will put in Redux on something that's based on a certain format, but then you realize, oh my God, I can't convert it to other format in case so you want your Redux state to be information complete, meaning you don't duplicate, but you also need to store information that it can easily transform to other things. And the transformation is perfectly fine. In fact, that in Redux land selectors, that's all they do is transform data from the application structure to exactly the data that you want or you need for your React components. So second one, reducers should own the state shape, meaning that like each reducer should know own exactly how the data is going to lay it out. You should know that and structure that accordingly. Third, another one is I'm actually a big fan of the Dux pattern. I mean, a lot of tutorials they will separate the actions and the reducers in the separate folders, and I'm not a big fan of that because here's the thing: I have never been asked to say, I don't want any actions anymore, or I don't want any reducer anymore. That just doesn't happen when you use Redux. But what happens a lot is, for example, you build a certain feature, feature X and feature Y, and then you find out that they want to scrap it. So for me, what I do is I actually structure the file or folders as according to feature. So I found that once I do that, if I need to get rid of things and do code cleanup, it's a lot easier because I just delete the folder, I clean up any references to it, and I'm done. It also makes it easier to not deal with all the / jumping of patterns because all the files that are relevant to this feature are in the same folder. So I actually found that more helpful. Also here about the data itself, going more towards the actual structure of the data in Redux. Normalize complex, nested or relational data, right? So a lot of times when I got like say data entity like a set data, I often don't put it in an array, especially if it's something that I know that I need to access singular a lot. Is I actually like to use objects and use the key as ID as the key because it's easier to convert from a set like object into array that is from array to an object. Um, and performance reasons, a lot of times you need to look up a particular data by ID. It's a lot faster. Perform it, do it that way. So that's where that comes. And Redux actually has some guides on sort of how you can do that. Like for example, one of the things I like to do with selected data. For example, we've got a whole bunch of data, and you say, "Well, I want to know which one's selected." So what I actually do is I actually like to create a flat the data bit, and but not necessarily putting the selected into the each of the the objects themselves, but actually just have a separate property on the top layer and goes selected, you know, selected items or selected. Let's say your domain is like, a contact, for example, select the contact, and I just list the IDs. That makes it, first of all, it makes it easier to not worry about immutability issues, but also it's cleaner that you know exactly what the data is that you need. That you're separating the data you need for the UI as opposed to data that's coming from the API, for example. So now event modeling is something that if you don't know what it is, definitely check it out. Eventmodeling.org. I actually have a really close relationship with Adam, the researcher at AdaptTech. Adam's the founder and creator of event modeling, and you definitely want to check it out because event modeling really works well with event sourcing and with Redux, and that actually using modeling helps you capture the essence of what you need to build, and also it really writes your actions and your structure pretty much for you. It makes it easier, but for sure, it also makes it easier to get input from your stakeholders. So the last one is minimize transient data in Redux. Like I've seen sometimes people put like form, like as you're typing, like the form, actual form fields in Redux, and that you should avoid. Anything that you expect to only keep for the duration of that page, and you expect, for example, you type in a form, for example, you want to use a combination of Redux and internal state, like set state, use state hook, for example. So most of these, are congruent with the Redux best practices on the Redux page. But one thing I do say is that I don't know why Redux still recommends Redux Dunk, because I just find it that it's something that's often quite inadequate. It's a simple site is fine. But the thing for me that really steers me away from Redux Dunk is that one of the big advantages of event sourcing is the fact that the event source itself, you can listen to actions and do things with it, right? That's one of the most powerful things about our event sourcing system. And yet Redux Dunk does not allow you to directly respond to actions. And that to me is a deal breaker. Yeah, it just is, because you have to sort of use all these functions to work around it, and you can't even react to the actual event, the event that goes into the Redux. And also many enterprise applications requires things like cancellation, debouncing, or running background threads. And a lot of these side effect logics that don't really fit into reducers. They just don't. And so and if you're at a point where you just want to build something quick and get out, simple app that's well straight, then you may not even need Redux there, right? You use reducer modbacks. I'm not saying those are suboptimal. It's always in context, right? So when I talk about is enterprise applications that need to be long lasting, it needs to be function and maintain well, right? So and then and also from those experience is that not all logic can be put in reducers, right? Because of the purity requirement, right? And also reducers can only see a subsection of the state, not the entire thing, right? Uh, so there's for all these sort of things, and the other one that really bothers me is also that the UI has knows about the function async behavior. And I think that's too much. You want you are to be as dumb as possible. What do you really want when you're doing so when creating just the actual UI things? That I want to be able to fire a action or event, and then how that event is done is not my problem, right? And then Redux doesn't let you do that. You actually have to know the actual calls and all the dispatches that happens. Not just the initial call, but also subsequent ones as well. And and that's another reason why I cannot recommend Redux Dunk at all. I really think you should not go there. So my answer to that would be Redux Saga. That's just what I use as default. It solves all the previous issues I have. You definitely want to check it out. And Redux Saga is part of presentation topic on its own. It is. It actually is. I could probably talk for hours on it, but I won't because we're going to run out of time very quickly if I do. But that's definitely the one where I it's probably the one that section where I train people with the most dramatic of difference, where people just go, "Wow, like this is incredible!" Like how it really makes the building of the interaction of UI and Redux almost very straightforward. So that's the way that I would have approach it. Yeah, just give me 1 second here. Okay, so and just give you a little bit idea sort of what it looks like. So you can sort of see like this is you can see here it actually grabs the actions. So you can see there's a user fetch requested, right? So he takes that and he runs fetch user and does this thing. Notice this whole code is completely has no knowledge of the UI, and the UI has no knowledge of this. All the UI does is that there's a user fetch request. I'm going to fire a event called user fetch request, and exactly what happens after that is completely within the Saga's control, which is what I talk about when it comes to making sure that this is exactly does exactly what we needed it to do. And the logic is clean, is completely separated, and also this code can be tested on in complete independently of the UI, right? Because you can say, I'm going to test that whenever the user fetch request happens, I would expect this call to happen, then this call, and this call. And all that can be completely independent of the UI, because you really don't want to have to worry about building React component UI components when you're trying to test the business logic of your front end application. All right, so thank you for attending, and I'm actually a little bit early here. I was actually so concerned about running over that I actually kind of a little bit early. If I'm sure I'll get some Q&A, I'll be happy to answer some of them. And thank you for your time.
So, thanks. It was a great speech. Um, I have actually few questions before like we will have more questions in
Oh
Q&A.
yeah, oh that would be great. In fact, that's part. That's what I miss about live presentation. I can pause and ask questions. That's probably why I I had to have more time than I thought. But I'll be glad to answer questions. Go ahead.
So previously, when I worked as a front-end developer, like 3 years ago, uh, I worked with Redux Saga and Redux Tank. At that
Mhm.
time, I preferred actually Redux Observable. So have you tried it? Any? It's uh,
I
like if you're
I
familiar with RxJS, then it's something that you can use RxJS with Redux,
Mhm.
and it was a great competitor for this Redux Saga. At
Yeah,
yeah.
I know of them. Uh, I can't say that I have worked with them, and I like to be proven wrong, but I have never. I mean, for me, it's. I mean, I'm not going to recommend a client or say that I would not use it unless I know there's something clearly superior to Redux. Like maybe there is. I just for me, I just get iterator functions, and I think that I learned I got it really pretty quickly. So it was maybe not everyone has the same experience. I know of that. I know some people. I know that Redux Observable, like some people love Redux Observable, and and that's fine. I I found that streams can be a bit of a hit and miss. Some people get it right away and it's great, and some people really struggle. So I just think from my experience that it's the iterators is something that's been around a long time. Like it's not a new concept. So I don't. So observable and streams are definitely more novel in some ways. I mean, it really depends on where your background is. So I'm not gonna say one is good or the other. I'll just say not thunk. Just don't use Redux thunk. Use something else. Let's go with that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for your answer. So I saw in the screenshot you showed some examples of Redux Saga.
Hmm.
Actually, since I haven't used Redux Saga almost 3 years, it's like can be a stupid question. So
Hmm.
I thought that you used generators and yield. Is
Yes.
there any way to work with async await?
Oh yeah, async. Wait, how to use async with EO, right? Like you, the reason why you see a lot of EOs is the fact that it actually abstracts a little bit of the like anything you can do with async await you can do with EO, and in fact you don't have to use EO call, for example, at all. The reason why Redux Saga recommend that is that it actually makes it easier to test because the EO call itself can be is an abstraction that you can actually use Redux Saga tools to sort of test unit test, for example, test that it got called and not actually make that API, or you can fake the output of that, right, for unit testing purposes. That's really why it does that. If you look at the Redux Saga, like or the guide, like everything you can do with promise all, promise race, that type of any like all that kind of stuff you can do with Redux. In fact, Redux Saga actually has more than what the JavaScript promise model like offers. Like sometimes I still find like things like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that. I can like make save time or to embed a lot interesting logic where it's all in one section. The logic can be very like things like cancellation, for example. Like that's not something that you can easily. It's very hard to do in Funk, and Redux Saga actually makes it relatively easy. Like it's never easy, but it's certainly more manageable.
Yeah, yeah. I also remember that when I uh, tried to learn Redux Saga or the library I mentioned, Redux Observable, I saw lots of examples that they showed It's very difficult to do cancellation in tongue, even it's not possible, but you can easily do them in, for example, Redux Saga or in Redux Observable.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of interesting question. What experience drove you to create this presentation?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Uh, what experience drove you to create this presentation? Like how you decided to
Oh,
talk Redux?
I,
Yeah.
I feel that one of the biggest reason is that when I introduced Redux, I feel that a lot of the complaints about Redux that it's boilerplate code and I have to switch statements and you go, why am I doing this? Why do I need do this? And I feel that a lot of the criticism of Redux misses the point of what Redux was trying to do. Redux was never set from the get go to be like, oh, this rapid development, you just need to get your data and go. It, I think Redux, what following the Flux architecture that Facebook recommended, it was pretty smart in saying that, oh look, we're trying to simplify some of those things by making a single state, but but by using event sourcing, an event source based design, it really allowed you to uh, have a very uh, great sort of sense of, okay, this is the event that happened, and then and because of this happening, this is the exact, they change to the state, and expect because of a change of state, these are the exact change to the UI. It, let's put it this way. When I say one of the reasons I love Redux so much is once I started using Redux and whatnot, I almost never needed the console log. Like, how a lot of people you just put it log to try to figure out what's going on. Like, it's very rare that I nowadays, like, when I see an issue, I don't go, oh my god, like within like like 30 seconds, like I'll be like, oh, right, I screwed up with this, and it's always something like because I copy paste and I just forgot to do this. Like it gets actually downright boring. But there's the thing, when you're coding these things, you don't necessarily want it to be um like you're just solving like a ancient puzzle. You don't want it to be like that, right? You want it to be predictable of a regular cadence. Your clients, like my clients, certainly expect a predictable cadence. And the ability to deliver on that, and to say, okay, I'm often brought in to deal with the Redux and then allow the junior developers and immediately to focus on the design, the layout, and the UI and stuff like that. So I can actually tell companies that, I've actually have companies save money by telling them, like, you don't need to hire like 7 seniors. You can hire like myself, one other senior, and then hire 3 or 4 junior and intermediates, and then we can split the work up, and we don't bump into each other.
That was interesting. Thanks for the answer. We talked about Redux Saga a lot. What do you think? Should we always use Redux as a state management for the state management in like React projects, or it can be, for example, big project, but we may go forward without Redux? What do you think about it?
I mean, I haven't. I mean, look, there's a reason why Facebook doesn't use Redux is because if you're big enough to a certain point, you're gonna want to deal with not just have one application for everything. I mean, I think that once you reach a certain size, that might become an issue. But if you're that big, then yeah, like it makes sense. But it if you unless you're at that level, like you're Facebook, unless you're Facebook, Instagram, unless you're that big, you Redux is good enough for your medium and what levels. And if you're building something really really low, like proof of concept and stuff like that, I mean, there's no shortage of like you know How you don't even need to use, right? You could just eternal state if you wanted it, wanted to, right? Or like use even React's own has own eternal state management at this point. So this is why I'm going like, if you are you building this to last, are you building it as a proof of concept or throwaway? If you do building as a throwaway, then yeah, you can drop Redux if you want. But I'm at a point where I have a template, I have a thing that I know what to do. That I I actually tried not using it, and I realized I almost I save very little time. But your mileage may vary.
Yeah, thanks for that. And last my question. Any like resources that you will recommend to learn Redux Saga, like not the documentation, but any other resources?
I
But
would.
like find some. Um, uh, I mean, not.
I don't know because I remember looking at tutorial and things like that. Maybe I'm not, let's say, the best person to answer. I'm actually considered building, basically, go to Udemy or something and basically do my own Redux Saga course. I'm actually seriously considering that, like do a training workshop or something like that, because besides the Redux Saga website, and I think that they did a pretty good job. They are doing a pretty good job. There isn't really that much out there, which is kind of one of the things I would say. If you want to say it's a drawback of Redux Saga, it will be that. Maybe of course I could be wrong. I have not. I've used Redux Saga for years, and I've rarely ever needed to spend a lot of time looking at documentation because I get it. Like, unless you're doing some really complex and like debouncing counts or something like that you have a really like you have to deal with sort of like manual like low level type of stuff. It's like there's some really thing that comes out of the box. Like take for example, take latest for example, like where you automatically do some sort of debounce already for you, where you're not having to worry about if they spam the fetch button, for example. So really like I don't really find myself leading you to be very expert in Redux Saga. But like I said, I know a lot of people have asked that. I feel a lot of people do have struggle with it. So yeah, I mean, I would like to I would love to hear feedback on sort of if people are interested in it. I would definitely consider putting a course or
Thank, yeah.
whatnot.
So thank you very much. Probably we will have more questions in Q&A session. So please leave us a comment if you have any question to Eric. We will get back soon. So thank you very much. See you soon, Eric.
All right, thank you.